And if your dog needs a pat on the back, that's okay too. Just take a break, take a minute. That's fine.
She has featured on a few podcasts before, actually.
She had. Oh my god, really? I hope she gets features on this one too. I love dogs.
She's upstairs, unfortunately, so she might not show her face, but
Damn
we'll
it.
see. Might get
Okay.
interested when she hears some voices.
Okay, okay, no snoring for me then. That's fine. That's fine. Look, Matt, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. I think I said it many times. I really do appreciate you coming on board with this, and I hope we can have this conversation, useful to people that watch us and listen to us. Uh, I think the best place to start, at least to me, is to start with the bigger picture, and then we
Mm,
can drill down onto the details. I think from generics to specifics is the best way to go, at least
mm,
for me. Uh, can
mm.
you help me with? Can you speak a little bit to why should brands consider live streaming at all, like as a crucial part for their marketing channel mix?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest reason we hear, so obviously like we deliver live stream productions for a lot of the bigger agencies
Mm,
in the UK. And a lot of the reasoning is obviously get in front of the younger audience, in front of the Gen Z audience, them being native to YouTube and Twitch primarily. I think the obviously from the engagement standpoint, it just offers a lot more tools than you would get from post-produced content. So obviously, when you're reporting on metrics from like post-produced YouTube content and such, a lot of it's around impressions or views and that kind of stuff.
mm,
Whereas with Twitch or with YouTube to an extent, you can obviously create your own engagement mechanics, which I think is really unique to the platform. It just allows for much more commercialization, allows for much more audience engagement. So I think that's really it's the piece that we focus on, like outside of the production side, is trying to find interesting ways for the audience to be involved, which obviously you can't react with post-produced.
you said younger audience being the primary target. Is that always the case? Can you see that working for more mature audiences as well?
I mean, the ratio don't really support that particularly well, unfortunately. I mean, in
Okay.
terms of the priority to use, I think there's probably other ways of engaging older audiences. But a lot of it, as I say, is usually to kind of reduce the general audience age or the customer age. So, for example, we were talking to the guys at WWF, so the World Wildlife Federation,
Mm-hmm.
and a big problem they had is that their standard marketing channels just mean that their crowd's getting older and older and almost dying off because people have kind of known the brand for so long, but they're not really engaging with that younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they showed a real interest in Twitch. Obviously, like donation mechanics are so kind of native to the Twitch platform. It makes total sense for a charity to do that. So, I mean, I'm sure there are places that have to be extremely targeted in terms of which creators and things you use. Because, I mean, inevitably it comes down to the creator audience, right? So if
I
someone's got an audience that operates over 30 years old, then I'm sure they'd be successful. But yeah, in terms of the general,
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
general,
I watch live streaming.
yeah.
uh,
Don't
uh,
mean to offend you. I mean, I'm probably older than you, so
there you go. So there's always an extreme example as well. But speaking of much maybe speaking of reaching younger audience, have you seen lately how presidential candidates in the US use Twitch to reach younger people? Like
yeah, I've seen
like
the
Trump
freedom map.
featured on Kick streamer, right,
Mm,
platform, and then Kamala I think
mm,
had like some kind of collaboration with Fortnite, and
mm,
they streamed that just crazy. So I mean, there clearly is potential behind it, and not I mean for businesses and politicians and all of that. Um,
mm.
if we look at overall marketing strategy and where does live streaming fit into it in terms of brand present and brand presence, engagement, maybe even commercialization?
So I suppose in the instances you just suggested there, in terms of what they're doing from the politics standpoint, I think a lot of it there is probably to get around the apathy situation. I think in that scenario, I think a lot of people have become quite disengaged with politics for obvious reasons
Yeah,
across all of our countries, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're trying to generate some interest and show. I suppose it's more of a brand affinity piece than a brand awareness piece in that case, because it's kind of showing that they care about that audience and they want to engage with that audience. And I think that in terms of kind of people being sat on the fence of whether to vote or not, it's probably going to be a very effective mechanic. I know they've kind of been appearing on kind of some of the broader podcasts, like you mentioned Joe Rogan earlier and stuff. Trump's been on there, which has had pretty record-breaking
Oh
views
my god,
from,
the
from what I
numbers are
understand.
crazy. Yeah.
Interesting conversation on that one.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, and like you say, it gives them a direct way to interact as well. Because it's all good doing like podcasts. Obviously, we're doing this one live, but most of them are post-produced. So there's a real way for the audience to engage there directly. So I think it is smart. It's bold and brave, because obviously you are kind of putting yourself out on an island slightly in those scenarios. You need to be prepared to
Yeah.
answer pretty quickly with some robust responses. I mean, it's almost like a live debate with the
Mhm.
audience, isn't it?
Mhm.
But the commercializations, it's an interesting one, especially for live streaming on Twitch. I think typically kind of brand presence in sports and gaming generally has kind of been logo presence. Maybe they'll do some giveaways and that kind of stuff. So I think they've really taken advantage of a lot of the commercial tools that are available. So that's something that we are kind of doing a lot to develop, just to make sure we have the engagement pathway from a create an audience standpoint, but it actually leads to some kind of conversion or a website visit or whatever the KPI for that campaign is. So that's probably the most interesting part of our work. I think obviously the production side is very pretty and engaging, and it's a great sales tool for us, showing some
Yeah.
great animations and such. But the real value, I think, is in those engagement pieces that lead to actual results, which I think we're quite unique in that approach, really.
I think something that people might not appreciate about live streaming, and correct me if I'm wrong, is
Mm,
the recyclability of the content.
mm,
We will record this podcast, but let's assume it wasn't a podcast recorded live. It was just a live transmission of an interview,
mm.
whatever. We could chop it up into so many formats. It's just crazy, right?
Mm.
Like, have you seen any good examples of repurposing a live stream into more of a offline pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I think in most campaigns there is a kind of post or pre-project kind of social delivery content model, which we don't really get too involved in. So it's more the kind of the other agencies that we work with that manage all of that side.
Hmm.
I think the interesting piece that kind of became viable like a year and a half ago is when Twitch changed their partnership rules and allowed for multi-streaming. I jokingly said to you before about kind of getting this across different platforms, but
Yeah.
that's something we haven't actually seen gain traction in the agency world, and we don't really know why. I know. So some of the discussions we have with the agencies is that when you work with those creators, if they are operating multiple platforms, the model they've created there doesn't seem to fit. And that even though the primary stream might be on Twitch, because they're streaming on YouTube and on TikTok potentially as well, they're kind of adding on the same costs for every platform. When obviously, like the core workload is in the presentation of the content. So there probably is a little bit of work on the creator side to make that accessible. But I think there's a lot of value in that, and just making sure that they're attracting all those different audiences. And since that happened, there's been a lot more tools that have come to market to help to unify that experience, because there was a big problem initially where you could stream on those three platforms, but all the chats were different, all the alert systems and event data were different.
Yep.
So again, a big piece of work we're doing at the moment is amalgamating that data from all those platforms to make sure the chat experience can be unified, like any kind of goals are unified across the streams, any kind of like nice animations are playing like tied to the data across them all. So I think there's a really big opportunity there from a live stream content side. And then obviously, yeah, in terms of distribution, again, there's a lot more tools out there now to make that easier. So we've had a chat with the River guys and Powder AI guys about the
Hmm.
AI content clipping tools, which I think are really interesting. I think they've got some work to do. I don't think it's 100% accurate yet, but in terms of kind of making that post editing piece a lot easier, I think in any campaign, that editing time is just such a wall to climb at the end of a
It is.
campaign.
It is.
It can be that those clips don't get out for 3 weeks because they're being kind of overly produced, or it's just a volume thing or a capacity thing. So I think those tools will all help with that to make sure that more eyes are getting on the content for sure.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I stream every weekend on Twitch.
Hmm.
I actually play games, and
What
that's
do you
that's
play?
great. Yeah. What do I play? Throne and
Hmm.
Liberty. Yeah.
Oh, you did say, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, or not. It's a great game. But what happens is that we stream for like 4 to 8 hours,
Hmm.
and then turning that stream into clips, shorts, it takes so much work, because even though during the stream, if I remember, I will mark moments of that stream which I think are interesting. It's then down to the video editing to create a story out of it, and they have
Hmm.
to search for moments, dialogues, pieces to frame it in a way, add captions. All of it's crazy amount of work. So Now we're streaming through Riverside, and they already have some kind of AI, which I think is something what you referred to. When we
Mm,
stop recording, within a few minutes, we have like a collection of clips that the AI thought was interesting. Now, mind
mm,
you, they aren't that good. Like,
yeah,
80%,
it's
I'd say,
at the moment hit on this. Yeah.
but when I actually get to edit the footage, I can use their suggestions to find the clip within the stream and make it good. So
Mm,
it's almost like an outline what they think was good. They probably go by the triggers like laughter or some kind of smile or maybe change in tone of voice. They definitely have ways to pinpoint those moments. But we'll talk about platforms and I think tools in a little bit. Um,
mm.
could you help me maybe understand the key differences between endemic versus non-endemic or native or non-native brands when it comes to live streaming, and how does that impact marketing strategies for both?
Yeah, so endemic and native obviously is those kind of gaming related companies that are already operating within the space. So they're probably doing some kind of live stream content.
Hmm.
They've established some kind of audience on social media and the content they're delivering on YouTube, for example. And often case there, it's more of a depth driving scenario. So in those cases, it might be for a new product launch, or it might be kind of bringing on partners to stream on those platforms to promote affiliate codes and such. I know affiliate codes are a bit of a dirty word these days.
Yeah.
People are kind of moving away from that.
Mm.
So yeah, so with that, it's kind of really coming around at more interesting ideas on the engagement side and how do we drive depth and affinity. I think there's a few brands that have got it very wrong. I'm sure you know about the Artesian scenario a couple of years ago, where the whole company went under because the CEO made some slightly silly comments on a live stream.
I don't
So
know about this.
yeah,
What?
they were doing a live PC build, and the CEO was on there, and they've made some comments about one of the smaller creators on their partner program, and it
Oh.
blew up all over social media. All their partners left, and the business disappeared within a few
Uh-oh.
weeks. So it obviously has its risks. Yeah, so for endemics, it's often, as I say, a depth driving scenario, whereas with non-endemics looking to get into the space, it's usually, I say, brands that are operating on the other platforms but are looking to get in front of a younger audience or do something a bit more tech forward. So like we've done some stuff for helmets and ANAs, for example. Like they'd obviously be a good kind of non-endemic class.
Hmm.
But it's all those kind of external brands that are looking to operate and grow affinity with that audience. The difficulty they often have is how do they present themselves in that space, because they just often don't have really a knowledge of how a Twitch stream should be put together, don't really understand the tools. So obviously there's a big education piece there at the start of those projects as to, okay, what can we do here that's interesting?
Hmm.
Ties to the brands, what kind of creators do they want to get involved that are kind of operating with the right audiences and such. So it's more of an uphill struggle. I think on the non-endemic side, I think we do see a lot of kind of one and done campaigns, which is again something we're trying to get the industry away from. So it might be there's a big campaign that goes on over a period of 3 weeks. There might be 10 streams in that period. They'll get some great results and they'll be kind of done. It operates in isolation. I think a big investment in Twitch campaigns is obviously the technology, the graphical components, and all those kind of elements that work towards that. So what we're trying to do is trying to get them to think more kind of seasonal, annual campaigns to spread that cost and make it more accessible.
Hmm.
So obviously, the last thing we want to do is them to come in, have a good experience, but it be really inflated in price with the creators and the production needs, and then not be able to continue to do that. So we're kind of moving more towards creating like streaming toolkits essentially that can be repurposed and used throughout the year with different creators just to make sure that value spread. So yeah, so there's a little bit of education there, I think, to do. So it's a big piece for us.
I think something, if we just go back for a second to the
Mhm.
faux pas that you mentioned with the artesian, it just got me thinking. Going live, it is putting yourself in a very vulnerable spot, right? As we said, you essentially expose yourself. There's no taking back. And frankly, I when sometimes when I mention to a podcast guest that is it okay if we stream live, their first comment is like, "Oh, so there's no takesies backsies." I'm like, "No, just the way it is." And so I imagine many people have this as a first objection to going live at all. But then if you add the technical complexity to it and then creative side to it, this becomes like you can understand why people don't even try. It's almost like the entry level is not that low, the threshold.
Mm.
What would you say to people which think that way? How can you convince someone that it's actually worth it once you put all that work into it?
Yeah, I think the entry level has changed significantly over the last 5 years. So we when we started the business like 6 years ago,
Hmm.
we we're primarily working with creators before we kind of moved into the agency and brand space. And just the baseline for production now is so much higher than it was then. I think a lot of the kind of OG creators that have been around for a long time can get away with it and just having a camera and nothing
I
else
know.
because
Yes,
they've been doing it for so
I'm
long.
always jealous of that. Yes.
There's a lot of similarities between a new creator and a new brand wanting to activate in the space. So you kind of have to show you're serious, which requires some investment.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, it's really depending on what the campaign goals are. I think it's easy enough to justify if the goals align with what we do on the platform. And as I say, in terms of kind of justifying the cost, it's much easier to spread that over a kind of a yearly campaign tied in with those other channel elements. So it's kind of more a part of the mix as opposed to kind of a dedicated campaign is probably how we'd approach it.
Hmm.
I mean, typically we're more involved with the supporting the bigger agencies in those pitches. So if there's a live stream component, obviously we'll be involved in the ideation phase there in terms of what we can do to support those goals. But it's not a conversation we have that regularly, to be honest, in terms of getting a brand over the line for a live streaming project. I mean, someone like a charity, I think that's a much easier sell, mainly because of the donation mechanics and stuff that are within like
Yeah.
Twitch already and how generous the Twitch audience is. I mean, they already support millions of creators through
Oh yeah.
platforms. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't they support a charity?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, in terms of audience demographic, obviously that's attractive in itself in terms of them being a young, high spending, like tech forward audience that are open to new ideas. And I think you'll probably see a lot of the Twitch statistics in terms of brand affinity because the creators there do carry such strong communities. If they work with the right brands and they have an affinity towards those brands personally, like do you see like massive uplifts there versus kind of a YouTube video and such. And
Mm.
it's just an easy kind of objection handler as well, because often, right, if you watch a YouTube video, you'll probably have a lot of questions that you can't ask.
Yeah.
Obviously, if a brand's being presented on Twitch, you can be quite bold about asking those
Yeah.
questions. And again, if the creator is um embed's not the right word, but if the creator is kind of very well aligned with that brand and able to answer those questions, that carries huge value.
Oh wow.
So obviously you'll see a lot of benefit from that. So
That's a very good point. I never thought about it. So what you're saying is that when you go live streaming, people can ask questions as they hear anything what you have to say, and then the value is in getting answers to those questions from the host of the stream immediately. Is that what you're saying?
it's a big part of it, yeah. Because in terms of a trust marker, it doesn't really get much better if they
Wow.
know that creator well. They've watched them for 3 years for 8 hours a week or whatever their viewership is. Like
Okay.
you
Yeah.
obviously establish some kind of trust with that creator and a rapport there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a friend referring a product to you, isn't it? Essentially, and I think if that's combined with a really good stream structure, that one we did directly for Twitch actually about a month ago was for the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold launch.
Mm-hmm.
And that campaign was split into different components essentially. So the first part of that was a product showcase. So they're kind of going through the different features of the phone. The second part of that was then playing Genshin Impact with the phone to kind of showcase how powerful it was. And there's a reward section at the end. So essentially the creator had to do a load of challenges. And part of that was, okay, do this action on the phone, show this feature of the phone. They could then discuss those features live on the stream, but also for doing that, a reward was granted to the audience. And to be honest with you, like over commercializing streams can be an issue if you're not providing some kind of reward, but that kind of reward feedback mechanism again is so established Twitch that it can work really well, and they're happy to watch that content and learn about it if
Mm-hmm.
they know there's going to something on the back end. But quite similar to how you asked me to review that web page, and it's a very similar scenario, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
if you're getting something back for kind of viewing a product or reviewing a product, then obviously you're much more likely to do that. So that was certainly an interesting one that was really successful, actually.
I think when we, yeah, there's always some kind of transaction going on, right? One
Mm.
way or another. You mentioned a couple of examples. Samsung phone, right? PC built, unfortunately. um, these are to me very good example of live streaming being used in B2C. What about
Mm.
B2B? What's different?
I mean, 99% of the campaigns that go live are obviously to engage with the audience. So they're all kind of B2C campaigns. I mean, I don't think we've ever done anything that was kind of to attract businesses,
Oh,
not
really?
necessarily. No.
Interesting.
It's usually, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to sell a product, obviously you try and do that at scale to consumers. So we don't really see much there. I think the only discussion we've really had about that is that we do a lot of virtual studios and virtual space setups. So we discussed there with
Oh.
a company that builds esports arenas about building a virtual arena and then having that streamed on Twitch to kind of attract other universities and schools. But I just don't think like the audience base really lends itself very well to B2B money anyway, because it's with it being an audience, an older audience endemically. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen on your LinkedIn, you showed the guy running around a room in I think it was rendered in Unreal Engine, or no? Do you
mm,
know what I'm talking about? Like it was
mm.
like letting them experience the meeting room. I think it was. Was that the idea behind the video?
So it was actually so a lot of the tools we use, obviously, we're trying to gamify live streams and try and bring a lot of those game mechanics into a live stream. So that one actually was for an external tool. It wasn't for a live stream, but it was a B2B tool. So essentially, the owner had bought this big warehouse. It was going to be an event space.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just having a standard kind of website experience, we built a virtual space that could then be used to preview how you would build an event space essentially. So think of it like The Sims. So you walk around with your little character, you're like, I'm going to put a stage here, I want to put this furniture here, I want to put my logo on this banner here, and you can really dress the space up and visualize it.
It
But then
felt
the
really
commercial,
good. It looked really good as well. So whenever you mention this kind of work, when you create a virtual space, I
mm,
think of those goofy characters or just hands floating around on the screen. You know what I mean? And what you showed was what was like Grand Theft Auto quality. It was like proper,
mm.
third person walking around the room that actually looks good, and they can experience almost touch walls. That's great. So it's interesting. I understand you correctly that then B2B isn't shouldn't like care for live streaming? Is that what you're saying, or isn't there potential for B2B in live streaming? I'm just trying to make sure I understand that um, people don't get the wrong idea that it's only for B2C in case it isn't.
I mean, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. I don't think we've seen an instance of it where it had a lot of value. I think like stuff like this on LinkedIn is really kind of a more appropriate place to
Mm,
be promoting B2B content. I just don't think that the viewer base is there for it. I mean, it's different from an esports perspective. Like, I'm sure, like in terms of endemic brands, you probably are going to get some traction. I mean, if obviously you're looking for sponsors and brands to be involved in an event, for example, there's probably value. But I think from a pure kind of commercial campaign perspective, I think it'd be quite hard to justify. But
but
great to get your
do you
thoughts on
mean
that.
like Twitch specifically?
Mm.
Oh, so you're talking like platform specific Twitch? Okay, but if we go beyond Twitch, it's okay. Like there is value in it.
Oh
For
yeah,
example, yeah, okay,
yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, for the same reasons, isn't it? I mean, we're live streaming this right now, and
yeah,
obviously
absolutely.
the joy of that is for people to get engaged and ask those same kind of questions. So
Hmm.
the same tools do work. I mean, we actually do some work for Reuters randomly. So
Oh,
they came to us. They do a lot of live broadcasts and events, and I think the corporate world is quite underdeveloped there compared to the obviously kind of the gaming platforms like YouTube and Twitch.
mm-hmm.
And they have a lot of kind of proprietary software that they run the live streams through. So we had quite a long discussion with them about how we can kind of engage their audience in different ways. So I think, yeah, if the right platforms are used 100%, especially from an event panel perspective, I think there's a lot of work to do to raise the production there. I think a lot of the events that you do see and panels you do see are quite dry. So kind of
Yeah.
gamifying that experience and trying to make it more exciting than just someone sat in
Uh,
front of a screen is kind of what that discussion was around, and obviously kind of making more kind of dynamic visuals and using motion and all that kind of stuff, which doesn't really feature in the B2B side as much as we've seen. So
it
especially in
it
the big
almost
corporate world.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, but it also it makes me wonder why there's such a chasm in quality. And
Mm,
like if you go on Twitch, man, those streams, there are one man bands, usually very young people, they have
Mm,
beautiful quality of a stream, like
mm,
done all by themselves. All the animations, backgrounds, lighting, crazy quality. And then you
yeah.
go on LinkedIn and you just pluck your eyes out. I don't know why. Like you are a person who has more experience in live. You're further down the live. You know the tech. You know your stuff. Why don't you put work into having the stream that's just nice to look at? Basic stuff like you know how they use those built-in features to cut you out of the background. Let's be
Mm.
honest, they look like shit. They don't work.
They don't really great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they still go for it. I mean, man, just
Mm,
have a just plain background at least, or something that like you nice to look at, something that gives you personality. And I think
mm.
that's often like an oversight in B2B. Where's that personality come from? And potentially when you do live streams for B2B, you still have to keep that element in. Like it's still
Mm.
human to human connection, even though we're talking about business. It's still. Would you agree with that sentiment?
I think so. Yeah. I think you've probably just identified a good opportunity for someone there. Because I think on the live streaming side, there's so much focus on the technology. Like every streamer knows probably everything about the cameras, microphones,
Mm-hmm.
lighting. I've got a long list of things they need to buy to get the stream looking up to scratch. And I just don't think it's marketed into the B2B world in the same way. Like I've certainly never seen a kind of someone looking at a high end, high quality like microphone for B2B live streaming or B2B content. And the product it's a different pitch, isn't it? So it'd be interesting to see if someone decides to slide into that niche. Because I think that they probably would steer away. Like if you're like working for a big corporation, you're not familiar with the gaming world. The last thing you're going to do is go and look at like live stream webcams that people use on Twitch, even though they're a great resource. I think probably some slightly different messaging there and some minimal design is probably an opportunity for somebody.
I think so. It really like if you're starting from scratch, you don't need to put much work to make it look just good enough.
Mhm.
Um, Technology aside, just sitting in front of camera, like in the middle, it's that simple. And like I would see people
Maybe
from huge multinational corpo, they would be like somewhere here, and I'm like, dude, just move up a bit, you know? So, I don't know. So I think, yeah, it's just a different mindset, right? Maybe because I'm coming from gaming background, I am software engineer, and I love this stuff, and maybe I pay such an attention to all that detail. I know what aperture is, focal length, all of I know that, and I appreciate marketers wouldn't. But I mean, if you're putting something out there, live stream or not, and you want people to pay attention, show them enough respect to just and make it good enough. Like again, I'm not looking for cinematic quality. This is basic stuff, and maybe that's a gap in the market, as you said, for a consultant to pop in, fix someone up, and there you go.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in their defense, I mean, live streamers obviously like build a career from live streaming and it's their prime priority to have that stream looking good. I
Right.
guess it's probably not the number one priority for a lot of marketers or a lot of people that are kind of presenting generally. So I think we
Yeah.
can give them a little bit of slack on that. But
I'm maybe playing the devil's advocate and being
yeah,
harsh a bit. I know. I'm sorry. Sometimes I go too far. It's fine. um, you mentioned a few stories from your career. Have you got any other examples that maybe GetRect delivered, or any real life examples from other companies that successfully used live streaming to drive engagement and business outcomes? Something that we can learn from. I think like examples really drive it home. So maybe you can bring up anything that you've done that was great.
yeah, I think one brand that does it really well, and obviously they've got some reasonable budgets to work with, is Samsung. I think they've done
Mm,
a really good job on driving sales and affinity with the gaming audience. Obviously, they've got gaming specific products, which has helped the scenario. They're not just trying
yeah.
to sell their normal TVs; they're kind of selling products within the niche.
Mm,
They've also invested in kind of every area of gaming, essentially. So, like we've done esports campaigns with them. We've done obviously this promotional campaign that I mentioned to you with Twitch around the new phone.
mm-hmm.
They've done a lot of creator-led, kind of more fun community-based activities, and I think they've done a really good job of just driving that breadth. Obviously, you need resource to do that, and the results are definitely long-term. Like I don't imagine they're selling a million monitors from one of those live streams. But I think they've done a really good job over time of placing themselves very firmly in the center of the thoughts of gamers. And it's great that they're open to new ideas. So a lot of the conversations we have there are like very kind of tech forward. So like I said, like the virtual studio and Unreal stuff, like they're interested in that kind of thing. So they're always looking to do something new and different in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really kind of the mindset you have to go in there with. I think going in closed-minded and doing a kind of half-baked version as a test is quite a dangerous thing to do on Twitch, because if you go in there as a new brand and you fail once, like it does stick around on Twitch a bit more than a YouTube video that
It
someone
does,
clicks
yeah.
off. Obviously, they're a very active social media bunch, so if it's pitched correctly, it can be difficult. But yeah, I mean, the Hellman's mayonnaise one was another one that was kind of, it was purely a marketing piece, really, but it was a really good example of combining gaming with messaging that you would never have thought of. So it was actually, we can't take credit for the idea for this one because it was through the beautiful guys at Edelman who we work with quite a lot. So they wanted to promote the no space for food waste. So they essentially, food waste is a big problem in the UK. Like, people throw away a lot of food every month. So they wanted to try and tie that in with a game mechanic and then bring a lot of these engagement tools in. So what they did was combine 4 creators in the UK playing Starfield, and food in Starfield is quite kind of notoriously useless within the game. So we tasked the creators with running around the galaxy, collecting food waste and depositing it in their ships or in a
Okay.
deposited
Okay.
area. And then obviously we did some integrations to measure how much they were collecting, leaderboards, so they're kind of racing around the galaxy. And then obviously we had the kind of marketing pop-ups and stuff, but the way we integrated that, we actually designed it so it fit with the Starfield HUD. So it essentially sat on the stream as a working piece of the game throughout the stream. So I think that was a really nicely thought out piece, and then tied in with the kind of engagement mechanics that we developed with the guys. It went really well, I think. It was well received, but it's
Wow.
just a good idea of how you can tell a story on Twitch in a different way when you combine it with these kind of gaming mechanics. It's just finding where that crossover is in most instances.
Yeah, I think this. Wow, this is an amazing example. So you have a mayonnaise company tapping into the power of gaming. That's great. I mean,
Mm.
gaming is this. Isn't gaming the second largest industry in the world, right after porn? I think it is. Like, it's huge. Even they even
I
maybe
don't know.
overtook it. Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know what you mean.
It, okay,
Never
so
seen it. Never
my
seen
my
it.
I never seen. Okay, fine. Okay, we'll skip that. Editor, cut it out. Okay. So what we're gonna do is move on. No, I'm kidding. But basically, if this is such a huge industry and all that is missing, I think to merge the gaps is some kind of creativity,
Yeah.
because I think you can make it work for any brand. I mean, just literally, you just gave me an example. You have a jar of mayonnaise, and they somehow twisted that into guys playing Starfield. It's just like, that's really good. I love that. That's
There's always a way. I mean, the difficulty is trying to find the game that works, that has the audience that works, with a creator that has the audience that you need as well. I think that's the really difficult part. Unfortunately, not a bit that we have to do because a lot of the other agencies obviously manage that process in terms of that selection.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think there's always a crossover opportunity somewhere. You just got to find it. It's just sometimes it's hard to find value in that as well, because sometimes you find a game that fits really well with a campaign idea, but the viewership might be awful on Twitch. So you're trying to kind of justify the value to
Ah.
do that. There might be a dip in the audience. It might be that it's 6 months into a season and the kind of viewership's dropping off, so it's not the right time, or it might be a game with like general low viewership. And that's kind of the difficulty, because it kind of does limit you a little bit in what titles you can choose, unless you do
Hmm.
really have a powerful creator who variety streams that can pull an audience no matter what they're playing.
I
But
was
obviously
about to
they
say
come at quite high cost generally.
they are. Yeah, they don't hold back. I know, and it's actually very interesting. So in a sense, you have to account for that unpredictability in a way, right? It's the every time I search for a game to stream, for example, I'll be looking
Mm.
at the top of Twitch categories, right? And I look at, oh, this is look, apart from Counter Strike, Valor, all those like always top games. There'll be sometimes like there's this TGC card simulator lately where people just have a card shop and they sell Magica cards, just something silly really. And you look at this, has like 70K views on the whole category. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. and then you go in and there's just one dude pulling it off, and the rest is just like
Yeah.
one viewer, two viewers. So how do you work with it? This is so dynamic, so unpredictable almost, right? How do you find the middle ground? And the reason I'm saying this is because I imagine creating a campaign takes about 3 months or some time at least, and
Mm.
you don't know what's gonna be like in 3 months. I don't know. You don't know what the game's gonna be
Yeah.
like, right?
And there can be some huge bad press around a game if they've done something the audience doesn't like that can affect those things. So it's kind of, it does make people err on the side of caution. So the majority of campaigns see tend to be in Call of Duty, Fortnite,
Right.
Minecraft,
Yeah.
these kind of big player based games, just because there's
Mm-hmm.
more security there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely a tough one. I mean, there are some tools out there actually. I mean, from a personal perspective, I'll give you a little gem here.
Okay.
Because we used to do a lot of creator educations before we moved into the agency space. Obviously, we're working direct with creators, so there are tools you can use to try and find underserved communities. So it'll actually show you the number of streamers and the number of viewers within that category, so you can choose where the biggest opportunities are. So it might be that actually the viewership in this game is 100,000 people, but only 3 people are streaming it. And the reason that kind of came around in discussions was because discoverability is god awful on Twitch. Like trying to climb from the bottom of a category is a real difficult task,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a popular game.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of mixing that into some variety content, it can really help kind of boost channel awareness, kind of dipping that stuff in. So I imagine Thread Liberty is probably in a similar scenario where there's reasonable viewership, but the number of streamers isn't huge. I imagine
That's
I'm not
right.
looking
Yeah,
at
that's right. And I used to stream in a different category, which was the other way around. It was Guild Wars
that.
2. It just didn't work out, so I switched, and Throne and Liberty has been awesome for me. It's really really good, and I think it also attracts more mature audience, so it's far easier for me to have a discussion with those people. So again, I think, yeah, you have to find your space essentially, and whether that's a brand, that's a content creator, you have to know who you are, what you need from the audience, and what you want to give to them, and just find that little sweet spot, right, where all those three things combine, and you can make it work, I think, that way.
Yeah, I think it's I know we spoke about this slightly earlier, but in terms of justifying Twitch to a brand, it can be quite a difficult sell sometimes when they're used to doing a lot of YouTube campaigns and you're talking millions of views over a campaign.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's very unlikely you're going to get that from one live stream activation. And because the metrics are so different there, and you're looking at kind of at viewership and kind of time viewed and the engagement mechanics, I say the education piece there in terms of what's actually valuable out of that data mix is really important.
Hmm.
Sometimes like a marketer has never touched the platform will just get a wall of numbers and won't know what any of it means really, because next to it will be a table of YouTube statistics that look completely different.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to take some time to get over that hurdle, I think, just to kind of develop that understanding.
Speaking of those misunderstandings and maybe misconceptions, what are some common misconceptions that brands have about live streaming, do you think?
It's hard to say really. I mean, I
For
don't
example,
think
okay,
the
so for example, maybe let me help you out a bit. For example,
yeah, please,
do
yeah.
do
That's
people
quite a
over
broad question.
okay, no, let's try. Do for example, do people overestimate the complexity of time commitment required to get started?
Um, I suppose it comes down to the kind of quality of delivery. I don't think they underestimate it, but I think giving them an understanding that it's achievable and it's not going to cost the earth is a big part of this. I think the expectation is, especially if you've been working in television or other media, like you look at a live stream production and think this is going to cost $500,000 to create this live stream production. It's
Mm-hmm.
obviously not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a bit of work to do there. I mean, it is a higher barrier of entry than things like YouTube for sure. If you're going to get good results, I mean, let's say you can do it on a string, do a relatively limited production, just get a creator promoting a product, and don't build in any of the components. But if you do that, then you're kind of missing the opportunity there, which is obviously those custom engagement pieces and what can you do to kind of get the audience involved. And I think there's a lot of reliance on the creator in that instance, as opposed to the brand activation in a lot of cases. So obviously the creator will have a load of KPIs to deliver as part of the campaign, loads of deliverables. And obviously a big part of what they're measuring with them is their kind of native engagement, organic engagement, and that obviously for a stream that's sponsored is going to be very changeable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to bridge that gap and kind of make sure that engagement maintains, you do need to build interesting things into the streams, whether it's setting tasks for the creators to do in the stream to keep them engaged. It's how do you get the audience involved in that same mechanic, and then how do you reward them for retention, and how do you escalate throughout a stream. So that's something we've been doing a lot of work on recently, is attention piece, because sometimes if there's a really kind of strong reward, if it's given out halfway through the stream, like 90% of people will disappear
Oh
as soon as
no.
the big
Okay.
thing's been given away. So the Call of Duty campaign we just delivered actually over the weekend is a really good example of that. So we
Mm.
had this challenge mechanic where we were showcasing the different areas of the game. So MZ, who's a great creator, was playing multiplayer zombies and the campaign. So we were showing the different areas of the game. There were challenges that were set throughout that, and then throughout the stream, it was revealing a code word for every challenge that was completed. So the audience was engaged, obviously trying to guess what the code word was from the
Yeah.
start. We weren't going to find out until the end. So it was a really fun little engaged mechanic, seeing them arguing and chat out what this code was going to be. And the way that worked on social media was, it was through the Xbox guys, and they had a post on social. It's like you had to guess on the bottom of this tweet. So obviously that engagement translated onto Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
amplified those posts, and there was a big PC giveaway at the end, as well as a few smaller ones through. And I think that was a really nice structure and the flow to make sure that every piece of the puzzle was engaged. And the commercialization element, we did some giveaway codes throughout the stream. So they tend to work really well as traffic drivers, kind of giving discount codes throughout. And something we've seen a lot of success with actually is escalating discounts. So if we are setting a creator a task, the harder it gets, the more they progress, the bigger a discount code might get for a store, for example.
Nice.
You find it's a really good traffic driver. Things like limited drops as well can be a really cool thing to do.
Oh,
That listing something
yeah.
on the store midstream and saying, "Okay, first one to get there gets to buy the thing." Yeah, that can be a real good kind of peak traffic driver.
So
So
from what I understand, it seems like gamification could be one of those things that businesses could use more of. And something that came to my mind instantly, there's a company who teaches coding, like
mm,
development courses, like Udemy, for example. But I don't mean them in this case. What they do, they merged Udemy with Duolingo and
mm.
created courses for people who are looking to switch the career into a development, and it just blow out. This is great, and I think this gamification goes back to the human psychology, and that in turn can help the brand do something cool and get people hooked up on the product, and in return get some, a loyal pair of eyes, and then just make it work, right? I think
Yeah,
it's
I think it's a lot in education. We actually had a conversation with a relatively new company here called the Data Literacy Academy, and something they were looking at doing was something quite similar. So rather than just having the usual kind of checklist of stuff you have to go through, you do like a corporate course or HR course or something, you're just kind of clicking your way through to try and get there,
yeah.
see what you can get away with not reading.
Oh no.
Whereas they wanted to gamify the experience. So we talked about doing almost like an escape room where they had to complete tasks that were related to the individual educational components to get out of the room. And something as simple as that can really help with kind of engagement in those topics, especially if they're a little bit dry, and they tend to be, let's be honest,
Yeah.
in, in those kind of scenarios. But it's the gaming psychology is such a proven piece now, like in terms of what kind of reward systems and what reward loops work to keep people engaged in a game. So from a live stream perspective, they're already familiar with a lot of those mechanics and that
Hmm.
psychology. So bringing that into a live stream makes complete sense and just gamifies that experience and allows for that involvement.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. Like a lot of it is kind of just progress and rewards, like similar to like a season pass, for example, like visual and audio cues, like to reward an action, that kind of thing. So it's just thinking about how do you integrate that in a way that isn't too abstract or kind of alienates the audience, really.
Hmm. So when you say this, I mean, human psychology is the same everywhere. Like whatever product channel you choose, you essentially work on the same principles, right? And the only thing that might be stopping people from trying live streaming instead of, I don't know, investing into 1 year long SEO campaigns is essentially lack of understanding of that environment and that high level of entry in terms of investment, like money investment. Um, and I guess a little bit of creative side too. I mean, all those
Mm.
examples that you mentioned, that are so good. They're like amazing. But first you have to come up with those, you know? And that's the tough one. So I
Yeah.
kind of I appreciate why people are a bit reluctant to try it, but at the same time I would highly encourage that they do. With one
Mm.
thing, and actually SEO is a good example. It sounds to me, and maybe try to correct me if I'm wrong. It You need to give it time. It's like a snowball effect. You can't just do one stream and expect wonders. It's almost like building a newsletter audience. You do it for 1 year in front of anyone, and all of a sudden it picks up the pace. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think I mean, the gaming audience is notoriously difficult to kind of engage directly, which is why the creators are such a good bridge for that in terms of kind of getting that initial impetus if you get the right people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a fair point. It's so I completely lost my train there.
That's okay.
Let's
We
move
all
on to the
do
next
that. It's totally fine. Look, you've been talking about Twitch a lot, right?
one.
And um, have you got any experience with other platforms?
We do. I mean, we do live stream on YouTube, and we support kind of live streaming through Instagram and TikTok and that kind of stuff. It's just that the primary kind of tool set available to us is on Twitch, and kind of always has been. Like they've got quite an open like data architecture. So in terms of being able to kind of pull things from chat, so that we developed a piece of software that reads chat directly. I know you mentioned obviously like the chat reading technology and some of the AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
So using something like that to kind of push engagement is quite an interesting route. Um, so do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, how does each platform serve? Hmm. Would you say that each platform serves like a different purpose or audience in a sense that, like, you have Twitch, which is obviously for streaming.
Mm,
But there's Instagram, which is more related to like photo, videos, reels, right? There's TikTok, which is dances to silly music, obviously, and Facebook Live, which everyone forgot about. Like, how do you, how can you leverage those other platforms for live streaming? Is there any particular angle that works better on specific platforms than the others? Would you say?
I think a lot of it's just around audience base. I think
Interesting.
like, in terms of kind of the gamification tools, as I say, obviously Twitch is kind of the
The
leader
king,
there because you
yeah.
can access all that data. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think it kind of comes down to the internal focus of the platform as well, right? Like TikTok had a really big push on gaming. They haven't quite got there because they haven't really developed the tool sets that Twitch has. So a lot of those kind of reward systems, like it's really hard to access like data for us. Like if we want to make some interesting engagement tools for TikTok, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost impossible unless you know someone sat in front of a computer in TikTok that can kind of give you API access.
Yeah.
And the same with Instagram and Facebook. So we have to develop things like Chrome extensions to chat and things like that because we
Ooh.
cannot read that data directly.
Ouch.
So we
Okay.
have to, it just gets a bit complicated. So the barrier of entry just kind of goes up essentially. But Instagram, like, obviously doesn't have there's a lot of gaming content on there, but I don't think they really have an outward focus on it. And we had a good chat actually with Selvi from Meta because we did a, a panel down at Comic Con last Friday. Something we were discussing was kind of what the situation was with Facebook gaming because they obviously had that as their kind of Meta platform.
Yeah.
Um, I was under the impression it was going to be rebranded and separated from the core Facebook side of things so they could focus on that, but it obviously just hasn't happened, and a lot of that development the team has kind of moved on, which I think is a shame. So they had some really good monetization models for the creators. They had some work to do in terms of how people were being found on there in terms of the algorithms and such. Like it was based on popularity essentially. So if Call of Duty was the thing that people were playing, everyone had to play Call of Duty, otherwise you were never going to get
Uh,
seen. So there's a lot of kind of issues there.
wow. Okay.
And then the other side of that is obviously the anonymity side of it, which I think is kind of a big part of interactivity, because people like on Twitter or on Twitch often operate under an alias and don't use their first and last name, whereas
Mm.
on like Facebook, you are the person that is writing those posts. It's very easy to find out where you live in that scenario. I mean, people are a lot like, better behaved generally in that scenario when
True.
people can like
True.
literally see you a
Yeah.
picture with you with your family, but obviously that's quite a scary component to that. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think they've all kind of tried it. I think they're all quite limited in terms of their tools right now. It'd be interesting to see if Twitch do provide any tools for kind of more storified content, because it's obviously not something they do in terms of allowing for kind of portrait format streaming and such. So I do wonder if they'll lean into that, because obviously it lends itself
Perhaps.
much more to the mobile market and the mobile gaming market as well. So
Haven't they launched stories lately? Twitch? I think there's Twitch stories now, right?
I don't know actually. That'd be
Yeah,
news to
I
me if they
think I
do.
remember a couple of people that I follow on Twitch. They posted stories, just like shorts, like you would have reels on Instagram. So this
Yeah,
could be an indication they're going in that direction. Perhaps they having, yeah.
it certainly sounds like it. And it's a conversation we actually had with the Samsung guys as well, because like a lot of the ability to stream a game from a phone is quite limited.
Mm-hmm.
We had quite a big conversation there, because mobile streaming through a computer is a bit of a task from a technology standpoint to get everything set up.
Yep.
Screen ratios are all wrong. Like it's pretty messy, but
Yep.
being able to stream direct from the device, especially with kind of upload speeds and stuff being a little bit better than they have been historically, like is there an opportunity there
Mm.
to kind of push in that market? Because there's just no real tools there that work particularly well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
it's
wanted
interesting
to.
you say about stories. It'd be interesting to see where
Yeah,
they.
you take a look. Some people actually do upload stories to Twitch, and it's just
Mm,
very interesting. I guess I don't know. I mean, you're used to going to that platform towards someone browsing YouTube for you for a few hours,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden you get stories like you would on Instagram and TikTok and whatever. So that's pretty interesting. And then you have stories on LinkedIn now too, right? I
yeah.
don't know. Yeah, so this format is getting more and more popular. But finally, you haven't mentioned LinkedIn in the in the list of platforms for streaming. Is there a reason? Have you not tried streaming on LinkedIn and thing? Which
No,
I
this
don't
would be
blame
the
you.
first one actually. This would be the first one. Yeah, interestingly, we sometimes do our own podcasts, but we do them all on Twitch actually.
You
Which,
do?
like, given our argument previously about it not being the best place for B2B, obviously with our strategy shift, it
Yeah.
probably would be a better idea to do them on LinkedIn, because we often do. So we'll bring in a creator and then someone from the gaming brand, like for example, and then we'll discuss, okay, how does the creator get sponsored by this brand? What's valuable to this brand from a creator standpoint? And we just have kind of a roundtable discussion there to combine both worlds. It's actually an event we want to do live as well at some point. So I think a lot of the events tend to be, okay, this is a creator event, this is a brand event or a marketing event,
Mm-hmm.
but there's very little out there at the moment that combines those two. And I think networking more between those creators and brands will, one, help the understanding from the brand standpoint in terms of what they're dealing with, and
Mm-hmm.
try and build some stronger connections. Because obviously operating online isn't ideal for everything.
No,
So
absolutely.
really good to try and get those heads in a room and just understand as well. I mean, there's often disputes really in terms of kind of the remuneration for creators, for example, what value they can provide. Like mentioned before, like multi-streaming, what's a fair way to approach that? I think getting those agencies and creators in a room to have an open discussion there will be
Mm-hmm.
much more productive than kind of keeping everything separate. So hopefully we can do something there.
That no, that sounds like a good plan. I think overall, I am a firm believer that the answer is always in the room, and if you bring people in, they will eventually reach some kind of conclusion and a way forward. Um, But speaking of content creators, what makes a content creator stand out in a live streaming context, do you think? Based on your experience when do design assets and production elevate performance, and when do they fall short? Like, tell me.
I don't think
I'm
the
asking for myself, by the way.
time for business will do your design work for you.
Yeah.
I think it's more kind of the initial production side. I think is a bit of a box check to show that you're professional. I don't think it gives you viewership, but it can help with retention. I mean, obviously, if someone comes to a stream and it's like you mentioned, the camera quality is awful, the audio is awful, they're just going to disappear straight away.
Yeah.
So I think that's more of a kind of entry point. Okay, this person's serious. I'll hear what they've got to say, see what games they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the kind of age-old adage of kind of the talent versus entertainment, isn't it? And the like you can make it to an extent with both, but if you don't have both of those qualities, then it's kind of difficult to really hit the upper tiers. I mean, you look at, I mean, XQC is an awful example potentially, but
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of being skilled at games and also entertaining in his own right, whether you
Yeah.
like his content or not.
Yeah.
Um, he's got those kind of unique
He
characteristics,
does.
and that's probably the hardest bit, is trying to be unique, because a lot of people try and do that through the events they'll do on the stream, like the content they're producing, but a lot of it is down to kind of personality and entertainment, and obviously that's not something you can really affect, but it's obviously something you can develop over time. And I think we've seen quite a few creators, you can almost tell when they come through the door that they've got the right mindset to succeed.
Hmm.
The ones that
Interesting.
actually have that multi-platform approach and come into it saying, okay, I'm going to stream for 3 hours, but then I'm going to spend the other 5 hours editing content for every other platform to market their Twitch channel.
Hmm.
Like those that come in with that mindset and have that breadth of presentation experience, I guess, really, in terms of live stream, post produced, and all that kind of stuff, tend to progress much more quickly, and their viewership progresses much more quickly.
Hmm.
But it can be a matter of just doing like really unique events and content. Obviously, like the speedrunning guys have done an amazing job on that kind of stuff and developing a niche.
Hmm.
Like we have quite a few creators that'll do things like a Pokemon collection stream, and they'll literally sit there until
Oh no,
they've got
really?
to whatever their goal is, or collecting a certain weapon type. So we kind of did a lot of work in the Destiny community.
Oh.
Exotic weapons are the kind of rarest weapons in the game. So
Hmm.
we had a creator actually that tasked himself with creating every single exotic weapon over a period of like a month, and we created like some cool visualization of progress through that kind of system. But
Hmm.
those kind of things can be really good for retention, and that obviously retention and building is kind of what you need. Like having 10 new viewers every time you go live on Twitch is great, but if you don't keep 8 or 9 of the last ones, you're going to be fighting the same battle.
Hmm.
But there's tons you can do there. But yeah, it's really hard to say. Like you think someone's super talented and they'll do well and be sat at the kind of mid-range for the rest of their career. Someone will come in who you think's kind of completely off the wall, eccentric, doesn't really understand how the platform works. They'll check in 3 months later and they'll have 500 viewers, 1,000 viewers, or something. You don't really know why. But
Yeah.
the unique side of it is a bit of a witchcraft scenario, I think.
I think people, at the end of the day, people go to streams to entertain themselves, and
Yeah,
obviously, entertainment, the value in entertainment is very subjective.
yeah,
So whether you enjoy Asmongold, who watches YouTube as his career, or you watch Shroud playing Escape from Tarkov for his whole life, then wherever you take entertainment from is up to you, up to the viewer. But at the end of the day, if you can associate a streamer with something, like you can contrast them with something, like they have some kind of space in your mind, they occupy a certain category in your mind, just like any brand, any business, that will do. And we're not born live streamers, probably none of us are. It's a skill that you master, but I think that the worst part is just to try it. And when you try it and you start with just talking about all the crap that comes to your mind, because you have literally zero viewers, maybe you have one viewer that doesn't chat with you at all, so you have to just keep going, you have to keep talking, you have to be the yapper. And if that is something that you're ready to challenge yourself with, then yeah, I would say go ahead. And whether you're a marketer or a gamer, it doesn't matter. I think live stream is a very versatile medium to essentially sell yourself, right? As a professional, as a entertainer. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, it's very similar to a business strategy, isn't it? Like if you try and be like a jack of all trades and appeal to everybody, you very rarely make an impact. I think just accepting that you have a niche and kind of building into that niche is the way to go. And it's the reason that we've been so successful is that even though we have a very broad design skill set, I mean, we could go for every piece of design work we see from a motion graphics site standpoint, websites, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But we literally just focus on this live stream component, and that's kind of where we've found our home, and just kind of focusing down on that. I think it's the same for creators. I'm not saying they necessarily have to be controversial, but if you are a specific type of content creator, leaning into that and not trying to get everybody from the Twitch audience is a really important way to approach it.
I mean,
Um,
we are jack of all. Well, we could be jack of all trades too as a web design agency,
yeah,
but that's not the way to go. I mean, clearly, you just have to pick a niche, even though you have skill in lots of avenues, but you have to pick one path to focus on so people can relate you
yeah,
to something. But at the same time, I think you would agree that picking a niche, especially in gaming, like let's say you're a streamer of, I don't want to put any game onto the car. On okay, let's say New World. Okay, this is already kind of people made up their mind. So you have New World. Um, and you become a streamer of New World, and that game dies, you're in a trouble. So it's kind of
Yeah,
important to be still somehow flexible, or at least have a backup plan, right?
this is where, I mean, you have to do it initially. I think if you're a variety streamer, it's very difficult to build on Twitch just because you're trying to get up in 5 different categories, and like it's just
Yes,
an ongoing battle that you're never going to achieve.
true.
So you do need to drive that depth, but the ones we've seen the most success with is the ones that have driven that depth, got into like the top 5 of those categories, but
Hmm.
then they start to feed other games in because the community's built at that point. They've got that affinity with their audience, they've got that relationship. They do tend to hang around, but they do see dips. But I do see from a lot of them that's a very difficult period, especially from a revenue standpoint, because they lose subscribers. Like when people come in to watch a specific game, like they've been watching New World for 6 months and like, what the hell is this? Like, I'm here for New World content, not for you.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a hump, but
it
obviously
is.
in terms of sustainability, it's really important, and not many people do it well and end up getting locked into a game for 10 years in some cases. They're just scared to move on to anything else because it's become their revenue driver, and like they're paying their mortgage through this. Like,
Yeah,
kind of get stuck in it, and then it really become a job at that point because you might be playing a game that you don't enjoy anymore, or there's toxicity in the community you kind of got to
yeah,
sit through. And
and it
like we see
just
it with a few like PUBG streamers and stuff that are kind of going through a fair bit of that kind of activity. And
yeah,
I think that the longer communities around, the bolder they get and the more toxic they can potentially
I
get.
guess
And
so.
if you're already kind of integrated there and don't want to move, it's quite a
Yeah,
hard
and
scenario
if
to
you sit
break.
on the ticking bomb, it essentially turns
Yeah.
into this negative spiral. It's hard to escape from. So you have to be very on your toes and be reactive to what's going on the market. Yeah, and but again,
Mm.
this is a parallel to running a business. That's it. That
Yeah.
is just the way it is. You are essentially a business when you're a streamer. So think about it
Yeah,
that way.
that's where they have a lot of problems. Like some of them get thrown into that, so they have unexpected success, and all of a sudden they're a self-employed business person with no idea how to
Yeah,
run their accounts or
yeah, true,
like build
true.
a marketing plan or make a proposal deck for a sponsor and that kind of stuff. And that's where they can
Yeah,
really fall down. But luckily, there's a lot of talent agencies that can support with that stuff. But it certainly wasn't the case really. Like even 5 or 6 years ago, like it was quite limited in terms of what you could access there, short of the kind of the bigger agencies were out there. So
yeah. The market certainly matured. I mean, just this morning, I'm not gonna kid you. Just this morning, I was thinking about the business profile of my guild in Throne and Liberty, and I drew a chart with 3 circles, and every circle was like a characteristic of an ideal guild member. And so the way I then run an recruitment ad for the guild, emphasis, just I'm sorry, I can't not bring business into that. Like it's just marketing mindset, I guess. But yeah. Hey, on that fun note, what are you looking forward to in the live streaming space next year or in the upcoming years? What are you excited about?
I think just the development of the market is kind of a big important kind of target for us at the moment. It's just really excited to see what kind of brands get involved. I mean, it's been good to see kind of all the Fortnite map creative, obviously all the work going on in
Mm,
Roblox. I think that technology side of things and the brand integration in games is going to be a really interesting piece. And it leans itself like pretty well into kind of what we do. So we do a lot of campaigns to amplify those because obviously you want to try and get player adoption and eyes on those maps. So the stream campaign is the natural thing to do in those scenarios. So I'm quite excited to see how that world develops. Obviously, we're hopefully going to see the new GTA at some point, which I think,
yes, yes,
considering
please.
they
I can't
were
wait.
so obviously they bought 5M and kind of getting more involved in the RP community, which that's going to have a huge opportunity from a brand perspective. I'm excited to see how that ends up working out because I mean,
Yeah,
typically with GTA, obviously they've kind of built it around fake brands being a big part of the game and being kind of a humorous component. So
this is
it'd be
great.
interesting to see kind of what happens there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, just excited to see how the technology develops and like what data we can access as well, really, because as I say, the other platforms are so limited at the moment, but it's a huge opportunity. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes there to allow us to start to activate on TikTok in more meaningful ways and that kind of thing. Um, and the AI side's a really interesting one as well. So we had the conversation, the automating production is like something we try and do as much as we can
Hmm.
because I think to your point, like a barrier of entry, like we saw quite a big shift. I think it's coming back slightly now away from kind of a single macro influencer campaign to micro influencer campaigns with 10 or 20 streamers, and it's very difficult to obviously run a production in that scenario, and the costs can scale quite quickly if you don't do something really basic. So a big part of our development has been creating kind of a centralized automated overlays delivery system. So everything can be passed on to a creator. They can go and do the campaign in their own time, but all of those engagement tools are kind of pre-built in there.
Oh wow.
But something we really wanted to do is automate it with game data. So I don't know if you're familiar with Overwolf or if we talked about this, but it essentially reads game data and stores it on the RAM of a PC. So you can essentially read the data, like number of kills, like health bars, like any kind of like generalized data,
Oh
and use
wow.
that to automate overlays. So like, okay, if they get 5 kills, screen loads, something happens, like there's disruption to the stream.
Wow.
But the big problem there is actually with the custom map builds, because they have such specific mechanics built into them that aren't necessarily read by those systems. We've been exploring AI as a way of pixel reading those scenarios. So if this event happens in game, what does that do to the stream or to the overlays, animations, reward systems, and all that kind of stuff? But it's a lot of the conversations we've had are the technology's there and can do it, but the server costs because of the amount of video they have to process might be insane. So we're trying to get to a point there where we've got a middle ground.
Yeah.
And if we can get to a point where that's sustainable, and that's really interesting, because then we can really fully automate every single production, just with a couple of people kind of reviewing, make sure the technology
Sounds perfect, and I believe with time the cost of running AI will be cheaper and cheaper. Like I mean, just
yeah,
this is just pure Moore's law. Like just every
yeah.
fourth generation, I think technology gets 4 times cheaper, something like this.
Mm.
But anyway, no, that sounds really good, and I hope the takeaway from this conversation is that people aren't scared from going live stream. They are at least intrigued to try, and then I guess just give it a go and see how it goes. There's literally nothing to lose apart from time, right? But that goes with every marketing campaign that you guys do. So don't be scared of it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think the key is finding the right agency partners that can help with the ideation and education process. And I think there's such a range there at the moment, where some of the bigger agencies and the mid-sized agencies are only just moving into gaming fairly recently,
Mm-hmm.
and those teams are quite small. Where there's some of the bigger agencies, medium-sized agencies that are quite heavily focused on there and have some real industry experts, like former Twitch guys or people that have been in the live streaming space for a long time. So I think being picky about those partners is really important, because you can get into a scenario sometimes where like an agency like, okay, we need to get into gaming. Someone put your hand up that's played a game ever in their life. It's like, oh, I played Call of Duty when I was 16. All of a sudden, you're ahead of gaming for
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
agency. And like, we've seen that multiple
Oh
times,
my
and I think
god.
like being selective about who you partner with is really important to see you've got a guiding hand throughout the process, just to kind of get to a point where you're comfortable. But I think it's the same with any new venture and new platform, new
Yeah.
technology. You just need that a little
Picking
bit
the
of
right
guidance.
picking the right partner is always important.
Yeah,
So with that said, Matt, I'm really aware of the time. We should wrap it up.
yeah.
Where can people find you and find out about what you do? Yeah, tell us everything. How to reach you?
So I formerly was fairly active on Twitter, but that kind of since that's not quite the nice environment that it used to be, I'm pretty much primarily on LinkedIn now. So yeah,
Okay.
Matt Kidd on LinkedIn. Website wise, a lot of our showcases for the projects we've done, like a lot of the brand projects and creative projects, are on our website. So getrectlabs.com.
Hmm.
So if you head there into the portfolio page, that's probably the best area of interest. It's got all the fun colouring in there. And then we've got a lot of resources and articles as well, but they tend to be quite creative focused. So I suppose for this audience, those showcase pieces that
Hmm.
go through the different engagement mechanics and justifications and results is probably the best place to go.
Okay. We'll link to everything in the show notes. And yeah,
Yeah,
with that, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for coming. I had yeah, I had to laugh and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks. All right. Let's have a look. Have we got any questions? There's someone in the chat. Oh, by the way, chat on LinkedIn doesn't work. So if anyone dropped a question on LinkedIn, I want to see it. That's how good. Um, yeah, that's how good LinkedIn is. Let me see. Are you there? Hello, Matt?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I said I had connection issues, so you've got quite a blurry image right now for me.
Okay,
It's my
yeah, that's fine. It's recording anyway. It's fine. So yeah, I have one question. There's a strong video conferencing market, so probably a spin-off from that could work for streaming in B2B. Okay, it's just general comment from David. Strong video conferencing market, so probably a spin-off from that could work for streaming in B2B. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's quite similar to the scenario we mentioned about kind of those tools being focused on gamers. I think it's just getting some tools together that are marketed in the right way and like building in some of those audience mechanics. So there's quite a lot of like apps out there you could use that you can plug into those kind of more studio-led and kind of panel-led scenarios, but it's quite limited in terms of their customization. Like a lot of it is, okay, you can submit a question or you can vote on a category. It's quite basic engagement. So they do exist. I just don't think there's like an integrated platform for it necessarily. And maybe something like LinkedIn could be the home of that.
Could
But
be potentially, yeah. They have
yeah, certainly.
long way to go, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in pain when I switch to LinkedIn for streaming. It's just, I mean, they weren't built with that in mind, right? It's something they add on top, so I forgive them. Okay, so that was the only comment from David, and Charlie mentioned that my mic is quieter than yours. It's fine. Well, it's AI will fix it. There you go.
being shouty on the podcast.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna stop recording and going live, and we can wrap it up between us
Yeah,
offline.
cool.
All right. Thanks everyone so for
Yeah,
watching. By
cheers.
the way, thanks. See you. See you. Oh man. All right. We're offline. Thanks, Matt.